YouTube, and of course, iHeartRadio. Now let's get to the NBA and some talk between NBA greats, past and present. Most notably, the one and only Ant-Man himself, Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Hall of Famer Earvin Magic Johnson. Edwards was recently asked by the Wall Street Journal how his generation of basketball players compared to the ones that came before him. Look at this quote right here. Edwards replied by saying, quote, "I didn't watch it back in the day, so I can't speak on it," Edwards said. "They say it was tougher back then than it is now, but I don't think anybody had skill back then. Michael Jordan was the only one that really had skill. You know what I mean? So that's why when they saw Kobe Bryant, they were like, oh my God. But now everybody has skill," end quote. As for Magic Johnson, I recently sat down with him and asked him about Anthony Edwards' comments last week in Las Vegas. Here's what the Magic Man himself had to say. Take a listen.
It's just said the other day that there really wasn't any skilled players in the NBA back in the day outside of Michael Jordan. That's what he said. Your response to that, Earvin Magic Johnson?
Well, you know, I don't never respond to a guy that's never won a championship. There's not nothing to really say. He didn't win a college championship. I don't know if he even won a high school championship. So.
Damn. I mean, that's Earvin Magic Johnson that said that. Before I give you my opinion, however, he wasn't the only one. He wasn't the only champion, the only national champion in college, the only NBA champion in the NBA, the only Hall of Famer. He wasn't the only one from back in the day that had a response to Ant-Man himself, Anthony Edwards, and what he had to say. Look at this from the great Isaiah Thomas himself. First of two tweets. Number one, propaganda works, so be careful what you choose to believe. That was the first one. Here's the second one. They look faster today. He's talking about today's athletes. They look faster today because of the rule change, which prohibits holding and hand checking to impede progress. In football, for example, wide receivers can play in the middle of the field without fear and rack up more yardage. Today, the rules favor quarterbacks and receivers, end quote. Let me just give a little advice to Anthony Edwards. First of all, Anthony Edwards is one of my top two favorite players in the NBA to watch. Nobody comes before Steph Curry to me. It's my favorite player to watch. I just think that he is the greatest shooter God has ever created, okay? When I think about Ant-Man, he ain't Jordan, he ain't Kobe, he ain't Vince Carter, but he on the way. He on the way in terms of what he does in the game. I love Ant-Man. But you show your youth, my young brother. Whippersnapper, young whippersnapper, wet behind the ears, breath smelling like Similac. You understand? Like Jerome used to say on Martin, okay? That's what you sounded like. Isaiah Thomas? Maybe the most skilled small guard in the history of basketball. Some people would look at now, look at Steph Curry. It's a little bit different now. They would look at Allen Iverson before that. They'd look at Nate Archibald before Isaiah Thomas. Nate Archibald was skilled, but Isaiah Thomas definitely was skilled, okay? John Stockton was skilled. Charles Barkley was skilled. Larry Bird was skilled. Dr. J. Julius Erving was skilled. The late, great Bill Walton was skilled. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was skilled. Fast forward a little bit more than that because you're in your early 20s, Anthony Edwards. Well, it's the year 2024, so I get it. So let's go to the 90s. Vince Carter was in the 90s. Tracy McGrady was in the 90s and into the 2000s. Kobe Bryant was that dude. Okay, we can't negate that. We can't escape that. Tim Duncan, since I'm bringing up skilled big men, excuse me, Mr. Fundamentals. I mean, what he brought to the table, that was skilled. There's a whole bunch of skilled basketball players that have been in the National Basketball Association. Now, I didn't expect Magic to get that raw, but Hall of Famers who are champions get to do that. And so what he's talking about, whatever your skill set may be, is it enough for you to win chips, to wear rings? That's what Magic was bringing up. Who gonna disagree with that? You know, one of the things that I've gotten into on several occasions, I've had the pleasure to be honest and privileged to get checked by the great Michael Jordan himself. And I talked about Magic, and I remember one time I threw out the debate about Magic Johnson or Steph Curry, who you got as the all-time great point guard, because in my mind, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, excuse me, let's pay attention to something here. When we're talking about point guard, a quintessential point guard, that's easily Earvin Magic Johnson. But if you're talking about impact in terms of affecting the prowess of the players around them, which is what a point guard usually does, you don't just look at them as a strict facilitator, which is what somebody like Eddie Johnson for NBA Radio, who had a really good career in the NBA, classifies as a true point guard. He doesn't consider that to be Steph Curry. He considers that to be Earvin Magic Johnson. I get it. Michael Jordan did not want to hear that. Michael Jordan said, what the hell wrong with you? You lost your ever-loving mind? There is no greater point guard in the history of basketball than Earvin Magic Johnson. And by the way, Isaiah Thomas was number 2. And we know what level of friction him and Isaiah Thomas has had throughout the years, dating back to the 80s. So it now spans about 40 years. It don't matter. It doesn't stop Michael Jordan from stating that Isaiah Thomas only has one point guard better than him in the history of basketball, and that would happen to be Earvin Magic Johnson, who, by the way, was 6'9", while Isaiah Thomas was 6'1". So let's make sure we remember all of these things. You're young, you're entitled to your opinion, you're a baller, what have you. If you're Anthony Edwards, here's what you need to do. You need to prioritize winning the chip so you can have a conversation like that with Magic Johnson. Because Magic Johnson said he ain't even listening. He don't even have to pay attention. And he's imploring the audience not out there not to pay attention because the brother don't have no chips. It's not your fault. But the Minnesota Timberwolves as an organization doesn't even have an appearance in the NBA Finals, let alone victories in them. When you make a statement like that, you got to ask somebody. Now, as an aside, if you're Earvin Magic Johnson, my man, who I did the event for at a casino outside of Las Vegas last Wednesday, when I asked him that question, you do have to take something else into consideration. If you're Magic, according to what he proclaimed, Luke Longley and folks like that deserve to have more of a say about Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan or anybody else than an Ant-Man. Let's pump the brakes on that. Can't agree with that. But it also applies to somebody as great as Charles Barkley. Let me not forget amongst the champions that he talked about that lacked skill. Hakeem Olajuwon would be included in that. One of the most skilled big men to ever play the game. He's a 2-time NBA champion, by the way, but I digress. Charles Barkley wouldn't be allowed to talk about guys like Magic Johnson, according to Magic Johnson's rules. Patrick Ewing, Reggie Miller, Chris Mullin, Karl Malone, John Stockton, Kevin Johnson, point guard Phoenix Suns, went to the finals with Phoenix, with Barkley and Dan Marley and those boys against Jordan. Kevin Johnson could ball long before he became the mayor of Sacramento and was running his own businesses, successfully, I might add. How about the glove, Gary Payton? How about Karl Malone? They don't have, well, they got, Gary Payton got it later, playing with Shaq and stuff, but essentially, Mitch Richmond, run TMC in Golden State, Tim Hardaway. I'm just saying, there's plenty of dudes that don't have chips. They got opinions though, and it should be respected. I'm just saying, Magic. I'm just saying, but his point about Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards, was valid. He really was.
Hello, Dove Nation. Today we're going to dive into 2 questions that have NBA fans scratching their heads. Are the Golden State Warriors still interested in Lauri Markkanen? And if so, how do the Warriors position themselves for next season? Can they secure a spot in the playoffs, make it to the play-in, or risk being left out of the competition? These questions are key to understanding what to expect from the team in the coming weeks. In recent months, there have been rumors that the Warriors were considering a trade involving Lauri Markkanen, who is currently playing for the Utah Jazz. Despite initial interest, talks appear to have cooled, with both sides still far from an actual deal. One of the main obstacles is Golden State's reluctance to offer young players like Jonathan Kuminga or Brandon Podziemski, especially since the Utah Jazz seem to value Brandon more than the Warriors' other young talents. A potential deal could involve a third party to facilitate the negotiation, which would add more complexity and uncertainty to the entire situation. Jonathan Kuminga, on the other hand, has already proven himself to be a player of great importance to the Warriors. His versatility, athleticism, and defensive potential make him a key piece for the team's future. On the other hand, Brandon Podziemski, although promising, has yet to prove his worth in the NBA. Trading an emerging talent like Brandon for an already established star like Markkanen may seem risky, but considering that Markkanen is in the prime of his career and could offer immediate help to Steph Curry, the trade could make sense. Curry, who is approaching the final years of his prime, would benefit immensely from the addition of a player like Markkanen, who is capable of spacing the floor and contributing significantly on both offense and defense. Now, the big question for Dub Nation is, should the Warriors stand their ground and protect their young talent, or should they take a risk and trade Kuminga or Podziemski for Lauri Markkanen? That's not an easy decision to make, especially when you consider the long-term implications for the franchise. Bleacher Report recently proposed a hypothetical trade scenario involving Markkanen that would involve 3 teams and multiple moving pieces. In Eric Pincus' proposal, Markkanen would land in Golden State, while Jonathan Kuminga would be sent to the Sacramento Kings, and the Utah Jazz would end up with a combination of Moses Moody, Kevin Looney, Gue Santos, Kevin Huerter, Colby Jones, and a slew of draft picks. This type of multifaceted trade could be the most viable path for the Warriors, but it would also require all parties involved to be willing to compromise in certain areas. Interestingly, Golden State reportedly appears more willing to trade Jonathan Kuminga than Brandon Podziemski, in part because Kuminga will become more financially burdensome sooner. This raises a crucial question about the Warriors' timeline and how they intend to manage their resources. Utah, for example, may not be willing to make the financial commitment that would come with a Kuminga extension, making the situation even more complex. In this context, a 3-team trade model may actually be the most practical solution, allowing all sides to achieve their goals. Alongside these discussions, ESPN has been releasing its daily NBA predictions for the upcoming season, raising another crucial question: where do the Warriors stand? Will they be a playoff team, will they fight for the play-in, or will they fall out of the running? To answer that, we need to look at the top teams in the West. The Oklahoma City Thunder, Minnesota Timberwolves, Dallas Mavericks, Denver Nuggets, Phoenix Suns, and Sacramento Kings are among the favorites to clinch a playoff spot. Compared to last season, the gap between 6th and 9th place is only 3 games, highlighting how competitive the Western Conference has become. Specifically, the Sacramento Kings are projected to win 1 more game than the Phoenix Suns, reaching 49 wins while maintaining the same position in the standings. Meanwhile, the Dallas Mavericks, who made significant moves in the offseason, are expected to move up in the standings. On the other hand, the LA Clippers could face a drop due to the extended absence of Kawhi Leonard, which could impact their playoff chances. However, the focus for Warriors fans is on how their team stacks up against these other Western forces. ESPN's prediction puts the Warriors in the group of teams expected to make the play-in, along with the Pelicans, Grizzlies, and Rockets. This suggests that despite the improvements to the roster and the development of young players, the Warriors still face stiff competition. However, there is reason for optimism. The arrival of players like Key Anderson and the continued development of talents like Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga, Brandon Podziemski, and Tracy Jackson Davis could be decisive factors for the team. Additionally, if Draymond Green can avoid suspensions and Andrew Wiggins returns to his all-star level, the Warriors have the potential to surprise. Of course, we can't forget Stephen Curry, who continues to play at an MVP level despite his 36 years. With Curry leading the team, the Warriors always have a chance to make the playoffs. My preseason predictions call for a 49-31 record, which would put the team tied with the Suns for either 5th or 6th place, depending on the tiebreakers. However, to achieve that result, every player will need to be at their best. If ESPN's projection holds true and the Warriors finish in 8th place, they would face the Pelicans in the current play-in format. The winner of that matchup would clinch a playoff spot as the 7th seed, while the loser would get a second chance against the winner of the game between the 9th and 10th seeds. However, with the level of competition in the West, every win will be crucial, and any slip-up could be costly. At the bottom of the standings, ESPN predicts the Lakers and Clippers will miss the playoffs with 44 and 43 wins, respectively. Interestingly, despite the Spurs' improved win count, they are still expected to miss out on the playoffs. The Utah Jazz, with 26 projected wins, and the Portland Trail Blazers, with 22, are expected to occupy the last positions. This scenario highlights how the West has become a true battle, where each game can determine the fate of the teams. Before we wrap up, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue following everything about your favorite team. We are producing new content almost every day to keep you updated. Stay tuned for more updates and don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments. Like the video and turn on notifications so you don't miss any news. Thank you for following NBA News on TV. A big hug and see you next time.